For Victims and Villains, my name is Josh, and today we are getting romantic, talking about the horror comedy Your Monster. Monster tells the story of a young woman recently out of a long-term relationship that attempts to find herself again in the world and finds love in an unlikely source while dealing with the chaos that follows in heartbreak. I feel like I haven't seen Melissa Barrera in a lot of things outside of Scream and Abigail earlier this year. And I feel like those three films kind of all fit that same range for her as an actress. What Your Monster allows her to really kind of explore her comedic chops. And she's got great comedic timing here. I thought she was very funny in this movie. And I'm really hoping this isn't the last time we kind of see her take on a more lighthearted role. And honestly, Barrera is only the tip of the iceberg when you're talking about how good this movie is. Tommy Dewey is also another performance worth talking about. Not only does he have tremendous comedic timing on his own, but he has incredible chemistry between him and Barrera. I loved their dynamic and just kind of the growth of their relationship from this kind of off chance meeting to kind of where they end up by the film's end credits. I may not look like it, but I am a huge fan of rom-coms. And when you take something like the horror genre that I'm extremely passionate about and you kind of bring it into that realm, I thought this film was a really smart take on both the horror comedy aspect, or the familiarity rather, of horror comedy, and telling it through the lens of a rom-com. Now, that's not to say that this film doesn't hit those rom-com tropes and have predictability, especially in the film's third act, but there is a nice twist with how they handle it in the film's third act. There are elements of Your Monster that are extremely predictable and formulaic. But I really do love what Caroline Lindy does here as both writer and director on this film. This film has an extremely funny and charming script behind it, and it just has incredible direction as a whole. And while I will say that the film does hit a lot of noticeable rom-com tropes, it does have a lot more depth than some other rom-coms I've come across. And right out the gate, kind of having that set up within the first act was a really bold choice that really does pay off and does really bring, again, a lot of range for Barrera to show off. And I think this film just kind of feels like a showcase of everything she's capable of as an actress. Tommy Dewey playing the monster in this movie, I really enjoyed his practical effects look. It kind of feels like it's a nod to Beauty and the Beast, but also at the same time it has this very classic Hollywood monster vibes to it that I thought was pulled off really well. I loved how the design of the monster was still very expressive to kind of show off both Dewey's charm and aggression at the same time. I thought that it worked really well for the range that he was able to pull off here. I've talked about the comedy here just as an actor or actresses amongst the cast, but overall this is actually a really funny and really charming film that it just had a really lighthearted thing that after some of the more recent heavy, more graphic releases that we've gotten, this is kind of that perfect lighthearted Halloween release that I can recommend. Now, that's not to say that there aren't elements of this movie that will satisfy horror and gore enthusiasts, but it's very, very minimal. But where they do use it, they make it count. And on that note, I am ready to run this one through our Rorschach rating scale. I'm going to go ahead and give Your Monster a 4 out of 5. I think overall this is a very solid, not only horror comedy, creature feature, but also incredible rom-com. Melissa Barrera just shows off what she is capable of as an actress in an exceptional way here. Tommy Dewey is also a performance worth mentioning. The two have outstanding chemistry, and the writing and directing from Caroline Lindy is just one of the best comedies that I've seen this year. This movie is charming and is perfect for where we are right now in the spooky season. Your Monster opens up tomorrow, October 25th from Vertical Entertainment. But let's talk about mental health, shall we? If you guys are new to our content, Mental Health Moment is where we will take a theme of mental health out of the film which we're reviewing, talk about it for a few moments in the hopes to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. Probably one of the most prominent mental health themes woven throughout the course of this is the healing process following a breakup. One of my favorite podcasts that I've ever had the chance to be a part of while doing Victims and Villains was a few years ago. We did an episode called Relationships and Mental Health. I'll provide a link in the show notes below. But one of the things that the guest talked about, who was an actual doctor, talked about how the fact that when it comes to our mental health, when it comes to heartbreaks, there needs to be a grieving process that needs to happen. And up until that point, I'd never heard it put that way. And it really kind of changed the way that I looked at things like heartbreak. And anytime that you have a huge portion of your life, like in this case, Barrera's committed long-term relationship, you have to grieve it because it's a portion of who you were now gone. And a portion of that process is trying to not only figure out how to go about life, but also who you are now as an individual post that relationship. And while rom-coms are usually really kind of lighthearted and kind of goofy, I think a lot of them kind of miss that opportunity. And this one really brings and has the discussion with your monster, talking about what heartbreak looks like past a committed relationship, especially given a relationship that ended due to some heavier circumstances, and what that looks like in terms of your mental health and how it can ultimately come from places that you wouldn't really expect. Heartbreak can come in a million different ways, whether it's seeing a movie that you've been anticipating for a year and it not being good, or your favorite sports team loses the game that weekend that you had spent the entire week looking forward to, or in this case, the end of a relationship and kind of a huge turning point in life. The end of a relationship, or this significant pivot when we're talking about the end of a relationship. I know the other two examples are a little bit more lighthearted, but ending a relationship not only has the capacity to quite literally move you and upend and turn your world upside down, but I think the aftermath process of that, as we see here in Your Monster, can sometimes come from places that are unexpected, and they should not be discounted. Never settle on your happiness or what you think that your happiness should be. Always allow yourself to be open to the idea that it's going to come from places that may be unconventional and that may go against what you've done in the past or have enjoyed in the past. I'm not a relationship expert by any means. I just know, speaking from personal experience, anytime when I've had real heartbreak in my life, it has led down to some dark avenues and for my mental health. And as a result, the rest of my life, and sometimes those took months to kind of get out. And so allowing yourself to going back to the idea of grieving a relationship can be one of the healthiest things that you can do, because, well, it may be the difference between you here today and also tomorrow. You know, as a result of heartbreak in the past, I was an individual that had a plan for suicide, and I'm not alone. The CDC tells us that there are 3.8 million people that had a plan and ready for suicide and had seriously considered it. Now, there are a multitude of reasons why people will go down that road, but heartache sometimes can be on that list. And I say all of that to say this: you have value and you have worth. And what this movie teaches us is that there will always be someone better that comes along after the end of a relationship. Allow yourself to have that grieving process. Find healthy places that allow your mental health to heal, and then go out and find where it could be for you. Now, if you or someone you know is struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, click the links in the show notes below to check out our mental health resource library. Your Monster opens in limited release tomorrow, October 25th from Vertical Entertainment. And in the show notes below, you guys will find additional links to check out our social media, more movie reviews like this, our podcast network, the subscribe button right here on YouTube, as well as the previously mentioned mental health resource library. And if you would like to help us support our mental health education efforts, you can find links to support us on Patreon and by signing up for a free trial of Paramount Plus. Until next time, remember to keep it classy and keep it spooky. Have a good night.